when it's on.
Martin, I've made it, but I've got to go at 4:15 because the other meeting's not finished yet. Sorry.
Right, no, there's no pressure then, Councillor Barker. So you arrive late and leave early.
Sorry, I apologise. I'm a busy chap.
I've heard so. Yeah. Thank you, Martin. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Audit and Corporate Governance Scrutiny Committee for the new civic year. So we'll start with item 1. Apologies for absence, please.
No apologies have been received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, declarations of interest. Members are requested to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest and or other interest not already on their register of interests in any item on the agenda and withdraw from the meeting at the appropriate time. Councillor Clough.
Yeah, just to register my interest in item 12A, I'll be leaving the meeting when this item comes up.
Thank you, Councillor Clough. So that's noted. Any other declarations? If not, item 3, minutes of the last meeting held on the 10th of February that have been circulated. Taking that as a proposal, Councillor Kerry.
Yes, 2 things. I was missed out on the attendees. I'm pretty sure I was there.
Oh, you were there. I recall. I can vouch for that. So,
Thank you.
with your name, are you happy to propose it?
I am, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Kerry. Do you have a seconder, please?
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Don't shout out, please, Councillor Armitage. Thank you, Councillor Rowe. So, all in favour? Thank you. That's carried. So, item 4, report of external auditors. So, the first is the audit strategy memorandum. So, is that over to you, Mr. Surridge?
Yes, thank you ever so much. And good afternoon to you all. You have today our audit strategy memorandum for the year ending 31st of March 2021. Whilst I'll take the report as read, I think it's important just to draw your attention to a couple of items, if I may. The first page I'd like to take you to is page 11 of your pack, section 1, that sets out the engagement and responsibilities summary. As your external auditor, we're responsible for issuing an opinion on the financial statements, and I will come on to the specific areas of focus for this year in a moment. We're also responsible for issuing a value for money conclusion. The basis of that conclusion has fundamentally changed since the previous year. So again, I will take you through the key aspects of that. We're also responsible for reporting through to the National Audit Office on the whole of government accounts and accessible to members of the electorate should they wish to make any queries about us on the financial statements. The next area I'd like to take your attention to is the audit scope, approach and timeline. And in particular, page 16 of your pack has a wheel with particular dates set out on them. The first thing I'd like to do is give you assurance that at this point in time we are on track for reporting and concluding our work by the end of September, which is the revised deadline set by the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government for this year as a result of the continuing impact of COVID-19. We intend to carry out our work, the bulk of the work, during the summer, with the conclusion period in September. There are, of course, matters that may arise that are outside of our control, and should those arise, we will, of course, mention those and discuss those with officers and or escalate them through to you as a committee as necessary. The next area I'd like to bring you to are the significant accounting areas, which are summarised on page 20 of the pack. Page 20 of the pack is a diagram that shows that for this financial year, the most significant areas of our work that we will focus on cover 4 specific aspects. The first 3 are consistent with the prior year, and I'll take you through those now. The first is that under auditing standards, all audits include a unrebuttable presumption that we need to carry out work on should management wish. It is in a unique position to override controls. It's not to say that we have any suspicions or concerns in terms of officer behaviour, but in being independent and professionally sceptical, it's appropriate that we approach the audit with that possibility in mind and therefore design appropriate tests as a result. The second and third areas are the net defined benefit liability valuation. That's the pension scheme. It is a significant balance in the financial statements, very, very large, and also based on some complex judgments and estimates that include the use of an actuary to help provide the figures. As a result, with that complexity, we believe it's appropriate that we spend some additional time and effort looking at those. The third area is the valuation of land and buildings and investment properties. Again, these are large assets on the balance sheet. They also require the use of a qualified valuer to help with the key judgments and estimates in calculating the figures in the financial statements. So similarly, we believe there's an appropriate need to spend some time looking at those. Those three financial statement risks were in the previous year, and we concluded with a clean opinion in the previous year. They just roll through this year. The fourth area is the recognition of COVID-19 related government grants. This is a new audit risk for this year. I'm sure you're more than aware about the number of grant income that's been distributed through to local authorities and onwards into the business and broader public. In financial statement terms, there is a financial reporting and therefore audit risk around the accounting judgments that need to be applied. The number of grants came through at significant pace. There are some grants that will not feature in your financial statements, and there are some grants that will feature in your financial statements. That is in complete accordance with the accounting standards, and therefore, because of the large sums of money involved, and because it's new, we think it is appropriate that we spend some time making sure the accounting treatment has been adopted correctly. The next area I just want to draw your attention to is section 5, which covers the value for money conclusion. And in particular, I'd like to take you to page 26 of the pack, which sets out the key areas of our focus. For this year, and is new, we're required to provide what's called a commentary on what the council's proper arrangements are. Now, proper arrangements are defined by the Code of Audit Practice and cover three areas. They cover financial sustainability, how the authority plans and manages its resources to ensure it can continue to deliver its services. It covers governance, how you as an authority ensure that you make informed decisions and properly manage your risks. And it also includes a third and new aspect on improving value for money, how you as an authority use information about your costs and your performance to improve the way you manage and deliver your services. Our evaluation will lead to a commentary. That commentary will cover all of the individual bullet points that are set out on page 26 and will feature in the public domain. As a result, it requires a significant amount of additional time and effort from ourselves, and also liaising with officers in order to fully understand the scope and come to a mutually agreed position that our report is factually correct. I don't intend to go through the remainder of the report, but it is important for me to assure you that we've completed our independence and ethics checks, and therefore remain objective and able to carry out the audit with due professional care. And on that note, I am more than happy to take any questions from members.
Thank you. You've got more technical difficulties with microphones, sorry. Are there any comments or questions? No, thank you. Well, I think there being no comments or questions, can we agree to note the report from Mr. Surridge, please? Can we propose a thank you, Councillor Shipman? Seconded from Councillor Clough. All in favour? Thank you. That is carried. Thank you, Mr. Surridge, for a very comprehensive read through of that report. Thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
So we now move to item 5A, the SIP for Fraud and Corruption Tracker Survey results. Over to you, please, Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Jenny Williams, Internal Audit Consortium Manager. So this is a report that SIPFA produce every year in relation to fraud in local government. So I've brought this report just to try and raise the awareness of the potential for fraud, and also I thought you would find it interesting. The key areas of fraud for councils like us are perhaps procurement, council tax, business rates. Tenancy fraud is also listed, but that tends to be more of a problem in London boroughs. So these are all areas that feature in our audit plan, and we do look for things like separation of duties, which help to minimise the risk of fraud. But it's just really a reminder that we can't be complacent, that fraud does take place. It could be committed by anyone in the organisation, from senior officers to long-standing people you wouldn't expect. We did complete the survey this year and submit the results. So I asked all officers to provide me with details of any fraud they were aware of, but no fraud was identified for 2021. The report also then goes on to detail the fraud prevention measures that North East have got in place, and that's quite a lot. We've got lots of policies, an audit plan that covers the whole organisation. We look at National Fraud Initiative data matches. We've got strong recruitment procedures, and we look at potential council tax support frauds as well. So if our internal controls are strong, there's less opportunity for fraud. So that's one reason, we like to see our recommendations and external audit recommendations implemented. But just to give you some further assurance this year, all of our reports issued have been either substantial or reasonable assurance reports. So that means we've been happy with the controls in place. So the recommendation is the results of the survey be noted, along with the fraud prevention method, measures that North East got in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Shipman.
Thanks, Chair. I was just wondering, I know it was just been commented on that there was no fraud detected, but I just wondered if it'd be helpful if we knew, were there any reports of fraud? Were they investigated? What were the outcome? Because not hearing nothing about fraud in a big organisation seems not correct to me. You usually find at least allegations somewhere that even if they come to nothing.
I don't actually have details of perhaps any allegations that were made. As I did ask officers to pass me any details of any fraud they've detected. In terms of the National Fraud Initiative, there will have been investigations take place, and when the next results came out, I can bring a report to this council of details of frauds on various reports, potential frauds, sorry, the investigations that have taken place, and details in that respect. That would be useful.
Right, thank you. I think it was interesting that you said that you've asked people if they've committed any fraud, and they all said no. But yes, I mean, seriously, I think the whistleblowing policy is there for that reason, so that anybody can report potential fraud. But I think the thing is, for us, that in an organisation like this, we do come across fraud, and potentially through council tax, housing benefit and so on. So it'd be interesting at some point perhaps to have data about the number of prosecutions that there have been at the local magistrates court, how many have been taken to court, how many have been proven and found guilty, the amount of money outstanding to council that's been through fraud, that type of information.
It will actually be a lot less now, because the DWP are now responsible for the fraud in relation to housing benefits.
Thank you. I think it would be useful at some point maybe just to have an interim look at that, just to hopefully note the decline, as you say, and that all the things that you are outlining in this report are bearing fruit, and no one's got burner phones, nobody's secretly called H or anything like that in this organisation. So are there any other comments or questions?
Fourth man,
So,
Martin, that's it. Who's the fourth man?
You've just stated yourself. So no questions. Can I have a proposal that we accept the recommendations as listed? Thank you, Councillor Armitage. Seconded by Councillor Clough. All in favour? Thank you, that's carried. So we move to 5B, the Internal Audit Consortium Progress Report. Back to you, please, Jenny.
Thank you, Chair. This summarises the work we've completed since the committee last met and gives an update on where we're at with the 2021 plan. We've issued 2 reports, both with reasonable assurance. I don't have any concerns to raise about those. We haven't detected any fraud. Appendix 3 then provides you with an overall picture of the audits we've completed. You can see from that due to circumstances this year, we won't have completed the whole of the 2021 plan. I have considered the areas that we've not completed for inclusion in the 21-22 plan, which is next on the agenda. That's done on a risk basis and discussions with officers. At the next meeting, I will bring a full annual report, which will summarise all the work we've done today in 2021. So the recommendation is the report be noted, and I'll try and answer any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? No, obviously, housing council tax benefit is in that report, so cross-reference, isn't it, as inadequate assurance?
This time, Chair, we've just got laptops and removable media and mobile communications that we've issued this time in terms of our audit reports.
Yeah.
We didn't undertake the benefits audit in 2021. We've rolled that forward. We're going to look at it in 21-22. And that was really on the basis that we have done that one every year. There've not been any staffing changes. We haven't got any concerns from previous audit work we've undertaken. So that's one of the ones we've missed for 2021.
Yeah, that's fine, but it's just cross-references with the report that we've just had, and we've been talking about benefits and fraud and so on, and also where it talks about ethics. So again, there's a link there, isn't there? And I know we're not doing that at the moment, but it forms part and parcel of 5A. Because as I said before, the only way is ethics. It's the best I can do. So can we move to recommendations then, please? Can we have a mover for those? Thank you, Councillor Armitage, seconded by Councillor Shipman. All in favour? Thank you. That is carried. So we move to item 5C, the internal audit plan. Back to you, Jenny.
Thank you. So this is our proposed plan for 21-22. I have taken into account the requirements of the public sector internal audit standards. As been reported previously, due to COVID, 2021 plan hasn't been fully completed. So some of the areas have rolled forward into our 21-22 plan. This year, you'll notice I've increased the contingency slightly, and that's so that we can react promptly to any emerging risks or due to COVID-19 or on the path to recovery. So I've also listed a number of reserve areas, so we'll pick those up if we don't use that contingency, or if perhaps we're struggling to arrange audits at a certain time. So the plan's been to the Strategic Alliance Management Team. It's also been around the Risk Management Group for comment and the Section 151 officer. On preparing the plan, we take a lot of things into account. So we look at the level of perceived risk, the length of time since we've last done the audit, previous audit results. So if it was a limited or inadequate, we do them more regularly than if they were substantial. Any management concerns we're aware of. And then we also have a good look at the strategic risk register to see what we can pick up from there. So we've got 486 days, which is the same as last year, and the budget for that has been approved by the joint board already. So Appendix 1 is the plan itself. The column in green is for 21-22. That's the proposed plan. And you can also see what we've looked at in 1920 and 2021. And the last column, the risk factor, strategic risk, that's just give you an idea what the main risk is. There isn't a magic formula that can say how many audit days you need to give assurance, but I'm happy from a professional point of view that the plan there will allow me to give an annual internal audit opinion at the end of the year. So I'm recommending that our 21-22 plan be agreed, and it just be noted really that if we do need to make any major changes due to anything that control weaknesses that might emerge due to COVID or something else, then I will bring that back to the committee before we go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Shipman, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Barker.
Thanks, Chair. Just two quick questions, which might be obvious, but I can't fathom it. You know, it says there's a grand total of 486 days for the year 21-22. How do you get 486 days of auditing in that time?
Well, that's made up of, for North East Derbyshire, we have one full-time senior auditor, a full-time auditor, and a part-time auditor. And then there's part of myself, so that's actually productive days. So I start.
Yeah. So sorry. I was just trying to think about how do you do that? But obviously, it's Labour time, isn't it? And also, obviously, we've just touched on the fraud and corruption stuff. We've only got 5 days allocated to that. You know, then we've got like 97 allocated to Ricknell Homes. Is there a reason that it's so few for the fraud and corruption aspect of it, as opposed to some of the others?
I think it's because it's sort of incorporated into lots of the audits. So although that's only sort of 5 specific days on probably the National Fraud Initiative results, we will pick up angles of fraud on virtually every audit we do. So it's perhaps a bit misleading, that figure of 5.
Okay, happy with that answer, Councillor Shipman? Thank you. Councillor Barker?
A bit linked into that, really. I'm on county council audit as well, and I know they're really struggling for staff to recruit people and actually get. I know we've had COVID, but they struggle to hit these targets because they ain't got enough staff. Are we all right on that front?
It's an interesting time to ask that question, because the senior auditor for North East Derbyshire has achieved a promotion to another council, so we are in the process of recruiting for a senior auditor. We've actually got the interviews on Friday. There weren't a lot of applicants, but we did have a few quality applicants, so I'm hopeful we'll be able to appoint.
Thank you. Interesting you said that leaving this authority is a promotion.
But no, they've gone from senior auditor to a head of audit position.
Glad you clarified that. My question's about the business grants allocating of 15 days. Does that include all of those that were given for COVID reasons, and ascertaining whether they're appropriate grants given during the COVID period, and is 15 days enough? So that's the first part. My second one is on the priority L refuse collection. We've allocated 0 days when we've just gone to taking over the recycling. And of course, with the new recycling process and taking over what was wards recycling, there may be 1 or 2 teething errors and issues and things cropping up in that way. Is the allocation of 0 days appropriate?
In terms of the business grants, yes, we were going to concentrate on the COVID grants. We've already been doing some work on that actually at the moment, so which were part of 2021. So we tend to be looking at the systems and processes rather than doing lots of testing. But if the 15 days isn't enough, we'll be able to utilise some from the contingency if we feel we need to do more. It perhaps also depends, the results of the National Fraud Initiative matching on business grants is due out in May. So it might just depend sort of the level of matches that are on there that need investigation, sort of how much work we need to do. And also, as you just noted, external audit are also undertaking some work on it. So hopefully between us, we'll have it covered off. In terms of waste management, that one was raised at the Strategic Alliance Management Team, whether we should have some days in there. It was felt that perhaps they wanted to get it embedded, and they were in the throes of embedding that, and it might be more useful for us to look at it sort of early 22, 23. But we have got it as a reserve area, so we can look at, oh, we haven't actually, have we? No. But we can look at pulling that in, or certainly keeping a watching brief over it with the street scene.
I think my personal, and I'll bring you in a moment, Lee. I think my personal view is that we should allocate some time to it, and the reason for that is I think audit at some point will want to look at the amount of money on street scene, particularly with regard to refuse collection, and the fact that we have successfully taken the recycling situation over, and we all applaud that, but we know there's a lot of cost involved, and we need to see the impact on council budgets. We also need to see that we're getting quality for money, value for service, all those phrases. So I think it could be something for a forward plan matter for this audit committee, and it would have been helpful for internal audit, to be able to comment on any findings that you have from the outset, really. Lee, I'll ask you to come in now.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reassure committee, although it's not identified on the audit plan, it's very much high on the agenda of the risk management group. So in terms of keeping that close eye from an organisational perspective, that's certainly going to be happening. But we'll take your comments on board, certainly. I think they're perfectly valid, and I'll catch up with Jenny outside of the meeting, if that's okay.
I think, is the committee happy with that? I think it's appropriate for head of paid services to talk to Jenny about that, and making sure that that's something that we can revisit in due course. Any other comments or questions? If not, can we move to recommendations that we adopt this audit plan? Councillor Shipman, thank you. Are you proposing? Second by Councillor Rowe. All in favour? Thank you. That's carried. So we move now to item 6. Thank you, Jenny. Item 6, which is the report of the Information Engagement and Performance Management Manager. Over to you, please, Kath.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so as you can see from the covering report of the 81 targets, we've got a summary there. 48, or just under half of the targets are on track. A quarter of the targets that are being affected to some various degrees by COVID. And then the rest of the report has got the usual split of targets under each council aim. So you can see the status of the targets under our economy, our environment, our residents, and our services. And then we've reformatted the appendix to hopefully make it a little bit more meaningful for members. So at the beginning of the appendix now, we have pulled forward those targets that have been achieved in this quarter, and also those at exception. So you can see a couple of targets there that have been signed that have achieved their outturn for this year. So the carbon emissions ones, not achieved in the way that perhaps the council would have planned. It's obviously been affected by COVID and the closure of facilities, but the measurement's been achieved, and obviously this is one to watch going forward. And then others, such as community grants, have been allocated as per the number planned, and the number of electrical charging points has matched the target, and that now needs to be refined as target of something more ambitious going forward. The video remote interpreting solution across the contact centres and leisure centres is now in place and operational. That's obviously a really positive development there, and improving access to our deaf community. So that's something for all of us to be proud of with that achievement. As noted in previous quarters, target 05 under the environment has struggled because they've not been in a position due to resources to do proactive enforcement work. Obviously, the planning enforcement team are doing enforcement work. I don't want members to think that's the case. They are doing enforcement work as and when needed and as and when reports come to their attention. But this target was around doing proactive exercises, and that's not been able to happen due to the resource situation. There is a new principal enforcement officer starting in July, and the head of planning already has in mind a couple of exercises that he wants to do in a proactive way during the next financial year. So no reason to assume that this won't pick up in the next year. And then a couple of targets here that are overdue. One is a petition scheme, which will be looked at in the next financial year. That's been discussed with the leader, and this target will be extended to the following March to allow that work to happen in the new civic year. And the review of tourism resource, that is going to Cabinet in May. So we expect this target to be signed off at the next quarter. So that's obviously taking a little bit longer due to the other restructures that have taken place in that department. So that's obviously the new head of services now in place with Carl, and now the focus on tourism has been managed to be done now. And then the one that's not started yet is a biennial customer satisfaction survey, and that's work that my team will get involved in once we've got a steer from management as to how that's going forward. But we do need to note there's a review of the consultation post at the moment, so there's not anybody in post at this point in time. And then we've put together, for ease of reading, the ones that have been affected by COVID. So these are the ones that are requiring largely some level of physical contact, or where access has been difficult because of restrictions. So there's quite a lot of information there for members to look over regarding some of these targets. And then the ones in here as well, as we've been reporting on for the year, obviously the leisure ones, where the facilities have been closed, and the health intervention programme and initiatives out in the district requiring staff. So as COVID restrictions start to come off, we'd expect these targets to move going forward. And then the rest of the appendix is the full council plan listing with those that I've just talked through, and then all the ones that are on track at this point in time. So I'm not intending to go through that level of detail. It's all there for members to look at. So that's the summary at the end of Q4. So that concludes the report, Chair.
Thank you, Kath. Any comments or questions? Councillor Kerry. You're on mute, Councillor Kerry. Councillor Kerry, you're on mute.
I'm on now, sorry.
Yeah, we can hear you now. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. It's quite an important agenda item, that, and it didn't come through with the official pack. It was due to follow. As I've only got an iPad, it's difficult to see two screens at once, so I wasn't able to see that item. It's one that we generally peruse. Can I ask next time that it comes with the pack in time, not comes after?
Yeah.
That's just a request.
No, I was about to say, Kath, do you want to answer why it was to follow?
Yeah, sure. It's because we didn't have the actual quarterly performance meeting with Southampton Cabinet until last Thursday. So the earliest I could actually issue this report was the Friday following that meeting. So it was issued on the Friday, and governance issued it as a supplementary report on the Friday. The only other alternative was to not bring it to this meeting and delay it to a later meeting, but I wanted you to have the Q4 information sooner rather than later. Now, that was a call I made, so I'm not sure if on reflection that was the right call, but I think this information is better if it's timely. But I appreciate that it appears that some members have not had the opportunity to view the supplementary report that was issued on Friday.
Yeah, I think you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. We've always said as an audit committee that we like to have information in a timely way so that we can make comment on it before it becomes old news. But of course, with the timings of other meetings and so on, it means that we have this report late. In fact, it was so late, I had it 2 minutes before this meeting, which makes it difficult for us to read it, analyse it, come up with the questions or queries that we would like to discuss in further detail. So we don't get a quality experience in discussing the things that we might want to in this report. So I think Councillor Kerry's comment is appropriate, but I think your explanation is also acceptable, Kath. And I think what we'll have to do is move all the other meetings, like Sam, to make sure that it fits around audit. We are the most important scrutiny committee going.
Well, I don't disagree.
Answer, but I can see the head of paid services agreeing to that, so I'll leave it in his capable hands, and we know who to blame next time. But we'll press on with any other questions about the report. So thank you for your comments, Councillor Kerry. Are there any other comments or questions about the report? Of course, the performance indicators about planning enforcement we've mentioned before. It remains a concern for this committee. While we note that, yes, it's hoped that an enforcement management manager will be in place in July 2021, planning enforcement continues to be an issue, and those who are members of planning committee and every single one of us as a ward councillor will tell you that it is always a problem. So this is one we'll probably be talking in a lot more detail in the next quarter, because we'd like to see some sort of action, even in the meantime, before a manager comes, because it can't be just reliant on one person arriving. It has to be about how the service does its bit to make sure that planning enforcement happens. So I can't accept that that is the reason that's put in front of us. What is the service doing to sort it out? So I'd like to see a bit more detail when we talk about it in the next quarter. Also, of course, there's quite a few things that are COVID affected, and we understand that now. But as we start to come out of the pandemic, I think the hope of this committee is to see a lot more of those being reported on with actual RAG rating that isn't COVID affected. I think that would be our expectation to see that in the next quarter as well. They're the comments from myself, having read it very quickly.
Well, thanks. Thanks for your comments. And obviously, if members have any questions after they've had a chance to read the report, then obviously just get in touch with me and I can follow up on any queries or any clarifications that members may need.
Thank you for that, Kath. And look out for a very lengthy email from Councillor Kerry with all his questions.
I look forward to it.
Thank you. So having said all that, you've seen the recommendation that we note the report on page 3. Can we have a proposer for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Clough, seconded by Councillor Armitage. All in favour? Thank you, that is carried. So we now move to item 7, reports of the Head of Finance and Resources and Section 151 Officer. So over to Jane for the corporate debt quarter 4 at 7A, please.
Sorry, Chair. We're demonstrate the debt position of the council. This is the outturn position, but I will just put a little rider on that, is that we're still working through the final position at the moment. So some of these main numbers may change slightly, but I'm relatively assured that it's accurate. If I could draw your attention to Appendix 1 and just look at the sundry debtors performance. I just wanted to highlight the current debt position because it does look significantly worse than previous years, and just reassure the committee that the lion's share of those outstanding invoices, or not yet due invoices as they're actually known in the current debt category, are to do with intercompany invoices between ourselves and Ricknord Homes or recharges with Bolsover under the Strategic Alliance. So of the 1.9 million, 1.2 million actually relates to those two organisations. So, but you will note in column 2, the 90 to 365 days, that is higher than it has been in previous years. And I think that is, well, almost definitely as a result of COVID. We didn't do any recovery action, as you'll be aware from previous reports, for the first few months of the year. We are starting to catch up on some recovery now, but it's obviously going to have a knock-on effect and take us a while to catch up. So the other areas to report on, there aren't any real spikes in overpaid housing benefits or HRA. As I say, sundry debtors was the one I wanted to highlight with you. So I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any comments or questions? No, Councillor Barker's looking for inspiration outside. So no. So can we move to recommendations, please? Do we have a proposer? Thank you, Councillor Armitage. Seconded by Councillor Clough. All in favour? Thank you. That's carried. So we move to item 7B on ethical investments. So I've done the joke already. I won't do it again. So back to Jane.
I wish I had that joke in mind, Chair, when I was writing this report. At the meeting on the 20th of January, you'll recall that we had a presentation from our Treasury consultants, All in Close, and we got into a really healthy discussion about ethical fund management, and the committee asked if we could bring back some initial findings. So this report is just the initial findings, and I think from this we will then decide whether, or you will then decide whether we want to move forward with this. So environmental, social and governance, ESG factors they are starting to play an increasing part of decision making, but it's very much still in its infancy across the country and across the globe, actually. Financial institutions are still very, very geared towards risk of their investment as opposed to the ethical side of things at the moment. Having said that, the Bank of England have stressed their intention to do some resilience testing to find out just how much we are doing in terms of this work, and we're expecting that to come out sometime during 2021. I think they're seeing it very much as a learning exercise. I'm not expecting any legislation to come out of it immediately, but it will certainly be insightful for us. I think in terms of our position, when I looked at the portfolio of investments, our cash investments are very much geared towards financial creditworthiness, but that doesn't mean that they're not ethically, economically, socially, and governance. I have to keep looking at what they all mean. I do apologise. They're not. That doesn't mean that they're not in those categories as well. Sorry, I'll get my words out in a minute. We use credit ratings quite a lot for this sort of thing. So Fitch and Moody's and the other organisations that are used, but they're the two main ones. They do actually build in these ESG ratings into their measurements now when they're taking a view, which I think is a good step forward. I think before it was just purely on a financial basis, but now they are building these Fs in. So I think in terms of our fund management, we're doing okay. I think we're following what the national picture is. I'm not saying that we couldn't do a lot better, though. I think there is ground to improve as the market for these investments does improve. But one interesting one is that in line with the current strategy, we've recently invested in an RP who takes environmental aspects of ESG incredibly seriously. So that made it very desirable to us because it ticks the boxes. It's a good investment in terms of returns, much better than the fund management, but it also ticks the boxes in terms of the ESG factors. So this is something that we could certainly do more of as we move forward and look to do more of that rather than just having all of our money in the money market funds as we have in the current portfolio. And they are out there. There are a few out there. There aren't many. 80% are domiciled in France, so France are ahead of the game on this one. And I think it's something that we perhaps need to watch this space a little bit. I think my suggestion would maybe to wait for the Bank of England report to come out so we know where the national position is. And from there, we'll be able to then assess our own portfolio against the national picture and move this forward, because I know this is something the committee were interested in. So I'm happy to try and answer any questions on this subject, Chair.
Well, thank you. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Shipman.
Just a quick one. When is this report from the Bank of England due?
My understanding is mid-term of this year, so second quarter.
So are we able to have that coming back to this committee, whichever the next available meeting is after that, so we can obviously then move it forward however we see fit?
Well, I'm going to agree with you, Councillor Shipman, that it should be put onto our forward plan, which we're coming to item 8, so we can say that the ESG investments comes back as a report following, because it's on the recommendations that the Bank of England will be carrying out their own review, and that an appropriate meeting following on from that, once we know what they say, we could then put that as part and parcel of where does North East Derbyshire District Council go from here. You've already heard that we've put our toe in the water of some ESG investments, but how can we further that? What else can we do to develop a portfolio that has ESG factors firmly at the centre of it? So I think at perhaps autumn time, the autumn of this year, we can have that report brought back to this committee. So we can add that perhaps as a recommendation 3. Okay. Report. Quarter 3. Yeah, so I've added that as a recommendation that a report be brought back to this committee in quarter 3. Are there any other comments or questions? If not, we move to recommendations. So we do have recommendations. 1, that we note the report on ethical fund management. 2, that we consider the review that comes back from the Bank of England's biennial review later this year. And at item 3, now added a recommendation that we receive a report at this committee in quarter 3 about ethical fund management and North East Derbyshire's part in expanding its portfolio with ESG factors. So having added that, can we have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Shipman. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Armitage. All in favour? Thank you. That is carried. So move to item 8, forward plan of executive decisions. Are there any comments on those? Today we've added 2. I'm sure the officers are always pleased to hear that we keep adding to them. So we've got refuse collection report specifically with regard to recycling now that we've taken over from wards and the impact on North East Derbyshire District Council and its residents, and that we also have an ethical fund management report for this committee in quarter 3 of 2021. I'm happy to add those. Anybody against? I'll take it as we're all excited to have those 2 added to our workload. Item 9 then, there's no other items that I want to consider as a matter of urgency. Item 10, you've seen the date of the next meeting is the 28th of July 2021. So I move to item 11, the exclusion of public. I move that the public be excluded from the meeting during the discussion of the following item of business to avoid the disclosure to them of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3, part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, as amended by the Local Government Access to Information Variation Order 2006. Can we have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Armitage. All in favour? Thank you, that's carried. So we now need to stop the live feed and remove any members of the public.